Dark Souls Remastered has 34 total bosses. So today, folks, how you doing? We are going to be ranking them based on enjoyability and just the overall experience of the boss fight. And we all know some of the bosses are really cool, but other ones not so much, maybe given the fact of how old the game is. But either way, we are going to be ranking them, and here we go. All right, so starting off, we have the Bed of Chaos, probably one of the worst bosses that FromSoftware has ever come out with. And that is due to many different reasons. It's pretty hard to explain, but basically the structure of this fight is completely ridiculous. You get hit from these arms in the most unfair ways. You get insta-killed by lava, and you're not really fighting anybody. You're kind of just battling this weird tree-looking thing. And it's not exciting, it's not fun, and it doesn't feel rewarding. Would I take it out of the game? Probably not. And that's mostly because at this point, the Bed of Chaos has become just a really funny meme in the Souls community. But with that being said, that is why the Bed of Chaos is ranked last on our tier list. So moving on, we have the Capra Demon. So the Capra Demon is a pretty well-known boss for being very irritating. It is a small little arena that you walk into, and you are immediately attacked by two dogs and then the boss. Look how, I mean, you can see it in the footage. It is a closed container, and you are being attacked by dogs. Now, dogs are already extremely annoying in pretty much all the Souls games, let alone the fact that you are taking on a fairly tough boss, especially at an early level, in a small container. It is a annoying boss fight. I would not take it out of the game, but hey, just like the Bed of Chaos, some of these fights, they are kind of like a rite of passage in Souls games, and so it is necessary, but it is without a doubt low on the tier list. Now, moving forward, we approach the hardest boss of all existence, Pinwheel. No, I'm just kidding. Pinwheel is probably one of the more ridiculous bosses you're going to face in this game. It has a really cool atmosphere and a pretty cool lead up to the boss, but it's not challenging and it goes over very quickly. It's definitely a meme in the community. It deserves to be in the game, and it is memorable because of how funny it is, how quickly it's over, but not a hard boss, and it is pretty low on the tier list. So moving on, we have the one and the only Gwendolyn. So Gwendolyn is actually, in my opinion, a really cool boss. It is not, in my opinion, the most challenging, and it's definitely not the most memorable, but in general, it's a unique boss because of the hallway you run down. The only really bad thing about this boss fight that causes me to put it a little lower on the tier list is the run back. There's not a whole lot that can really be said about the run back except that it's just awful. It's pretty annoying, and like I said, it definitely ruins a little bit of the experience for this boss fight, but she is a very relevant character in the story. She's cool looking. She's just going to be put a little bit lower on the tier list. But on that note, we are moving on to Artorias. Artorias is probably my favorite boss in Dark Souls Remastered. This guy is absolutely insane. There are a few different reasons for that. First of all, the introduction to Artorias is amazing. You hear about this guy in the base game a little bit. You fight his partner, Sif, which I'll rank him as well. And you eventually find him right here in the DLC, and you fight him, and he is a challenging boss. He has really cool attacks, and he definitely gave me a lot of trouble when I first went against him. But it's almost like FromSoftware took a lot from this boss. It's almost like they learned how to design future bosses and future challenges from Artorias. His movement is kind of familiar in the future of the games. And once you learn the lore of Artorias, and I won't spoil it all, and in fact, myself, I'm still learning everything, he is really cool and pretty much a really strong icon for Dark Souls Remastered. So, moving on, we have the beautiful Moonlight Butterfly. So the Moonlight Butterfly is it's a pretty simple boss fight. There's not a whole lot that is crazy about it, but it is definitely a iconic boss in Dark Souls. It's just kind of that introductory sort of boss that I think most of us face pretty early on. Like I said, there's nothing too crazy or exciting about it, but that is kind of part of just the boss's quality. It's not really supposed to be anything insane. So it's a little lower on the tier list, but I do like the boss. So now we are moving on to the Stray Demon. I'm putting this boss pretty much in the middle. It's a solid boss fight. I think right there, the experience of it falling through the floor and getting absolutely ambushed by the boss is really cool. And the movements are pretty fun just to learn. It's not insanely challenging, but I do like the boss fight. Like I said, not all the boss fights have to be a nail biter, and this is just a really well-designed classic boss fight. So now we have Seath the Scaleless. This boss fight is a very interesting one. You first encounter him and you're pretty much instantly dead. There's no way to really win the fight, but then you get into a little bit of a rematch with him later. And the goal is you have to destroy that little crystal in the back, and then you can actually do damage to him. I think the experience is really cool. There's not really any crazy challenge here. It can be a little tricky, and it's definitely a little intimidating because he's a massive creature. But nonetheless, he is a great boss and definitely an important part of the game. Now we have one of my personal favorites, Gravelord Nito. So he is, in general, a very relevant boss to the story. He's one of the main ones that you actually have to fight to progress through the game. Gravelord Nito is the Lord of Death. And as you can see, he is a abomination. He is formed of a bunch of skeletons. In the boss fight, you're attacked by a bunch of skeletons. I don't find this boss fight to be the hardest one, but he is definitely one of the coolest ones, and that is why he is going to be very high on our tier list. Moving forward, we have the Iron Golem, one of the most iconic bosses in the game. He is a towering piece of armor that is on top of this, massive structure that leads you to Anor Londo. He is a staple in the game. He's a super cool boss. I didn't find him to be particularly challenging, but you can actually do a couple different things that's pretty cool. If you hit his legs in a certain direction, he can actually fall off the bridge, which I thought was a really cool feature for this boss. But not too challenging, but definitely a cool boss. He earns a spot in the middle. Now we have the Lord of Cinder, Gwyn. So he is probably my second favorite boss in the entire game. Pretty much everything went well with the creation of this boss. The music, the actual design of the boss, everything that led up to it, the arena, everything is just flawless. The only thing that can be critiqued is the difficulty, but quite frankly, that doesn't matter at all. We all know that this boss is one of the best in all of FromSoftware history, and it deserves to be very high on this list. Next, we have the adorable Sif, the most loyal boss fight in the game. So this fight is a beautiful fight. You are facing against the loyal partner of Artorias, who is protecting Artorias' grave, and you're going over there pretty much causing trouble in his eyes. So he's defending his owner, you're causing problems. It's an epic battle. In general, the boss fight is actually a little challenging. His movements are a little hard to work with, and they actually have a really cool feature towards the end of the boss where he starts to kind of limp around, and so that makes it a little sad. A lot of people agree it's a pretty sad boss fight, but we all respect Sif for what he did, and he has earned his role to be a high-ranked boss. Now we have Mr. Gaping Dragon. I'm pretty much putting him as a solid boss fight, middle of the tier list. There's pretty much nothing really wrong with this boss. The experience of it is so much fun. You go through these crazy sewers and you end up fighting a monstrosity. The difficulty of this boss fight isn't too high, but it is definitely challenging enough to where if you are first starting off in Dark Souls, it is going to give you a fair bit of trouble, and especially the fact that you can attack his tail and get an extra item and do significant damage on the boss shows that it is a well-made boss. All right, guys, the Four Kings. So I have an interesting take on this boss fight. I think it is a cool boss fight. It's a solid fight, but I don't look forward to it. I just don't really look forward to fighting this boss. I think that the process that leads up to it is actually a little annoying. I'm just not really a fan of New Londo. Like I said, it's a solid boss fight. Not my favorite, but I'm glad it's in the game. All right, now we have the Demon Fire Sage. So there's not a whole lot to say about this boss. He's a solid boss fight in the game. It's really kind of just a fire remake of the Stray Demon or the Asylum Demon. It's a fun boss fight. I'm glad it's placed where it is because it just adds for a bit of a surprise. The fight itself actually isn't that difficult once you can learn how to dodge through his, waving of his hammer or whatever when it shoots that red blast. But solid boss fight. The next boss is definitely one that is a little less known. It is the Crossbreed Priscilla. I don't know, whatever. It's in the Painted World place that you can go in Orlando, obviously. Not a very challenging boss, kind of just a plain one in my opinion. It's, it's got a few weird moments when she goes invisible, but like I said, it's not really memorable. Worth doing for sure. It gives you a lot of souls, but nothing crazy, just an okay boss. All right, now we have the Chaos Witch Quelaag. So this boss is loved for many reasons, some of which are a little inappropriate, which I won't really go into. You can read the signs leading up to the boss and you can figure it out yourself. Regardless, this boss is really cool. The design of it is actually, I think, very unique. It's a little challenging, especially early game. It's definitely, it has its hard little moments, but in general, you play the game once or twice. It's not going to be anything too crazy, but it is a solid boss fight and it is a really great part of the game. All right, now we have the Centipede Demon. So he is one of my favorites. This boss is terrifying. The design of this boss is probably one of my favorite FromSoftware creations. The boss fight itself is actually pretty challenging, I think. There's lava everywhere. He does significant damage. So you're pretty much battling the environment and the boss simultaneously, which is always a very interesting combination for boss fights, but it is done perfectly here. And the soundtrack is perfect. So a really solid boss fight to have in the game. So now we have the Bell Gargoyles. So I'm going to put them as, a solid boss fight, definitely in the middle here. But the one thing I will say is, you guys will probably hear me complain a lot about getting ganged up on in boss fights. That's something that is always aggravating. I'm sure we can all relate to that experience. However, with this boss fight, it is actually done really well. And as far as enjoyability, honestly, I would place it just right in the middle. It's a perfect first kind of challenge in Dark Souls. As you'd probably expect, just like the other demons, the Asylum Demon is going to be ranked just in the middle as a solid boss as well. I think this is the perfect boss as a intro to the game. All around, this boss is just a classic. So one of my favorites that I actually just recently took on in my Dark Souls 1 playthrough was Kalameet the Black Dragon. So this boss fight is really interesting. You have to go to his location, his boss arena, get killed by him, and then basically go to the archer you just saw, and he will shoot the dragon down. Most of you probably already know that, but for me, this was actually a first experience despite the fact that I played the game before, and I actually managed to beat the boss on my first try, which probably is thanks to the shield I was using, which I used a lot in my playthrough. However, this boss is very challenging. The movements are very difficult to learn. And all around, this is just one of the coolest bosses in the game and definitely high on the list of dragons in the Souls games, because most of the dragons that you'll encounter are very, very difficult. Next one that we are going to rank is Manus, which is the father of the Abyss. I had a ton of fun with this one, and in fact, this is actually one of the boss fights that I did not take on before my most recent playthrough, in addition to Kalameet. This guy is crazy. The boss fight itself is very difficult. It's something that you definitely are going to be trying over and over again unless you are over-leveled or you're a veteran player in, the Souls games. And you can summon Sith, and there's a lot of lore here to learn that you should look into regarding Artorias, Sith, and Manus. Manus really does feel like the main villain in this story. So, the Sanctuary Guardian. Well, he's not really that exciting. He's a solid boss fight, but he is a DLC boss, so he's kind of held to a higher standard. Not really challenging, nothing too crazy. He has a cool look to him, but he's really kind of just the boss you get done to get to the real good stuff. So now we have probably the best named boss in Dark Souls. It's called Ceaseless Discharge. So yeah, very strange name, but hey, it looks cool. Definitely a cool design. This definitely isn't the most intense boss or the most memorable, but it is pretty cool. Sometimes it feels a little janky fighting against the boss, but I'm not going to complain about that at all. And when you actually kill the boss, it creates this cool little cutscene of the land kind of changing. So definitely an impactful boss when you beat it. And overall, I would just say the experience is pretty decent. All right, we have finally made it to Ornstein and Smough. So one of the most famous boss fights in the Souls series. Probably one of the best pieces of work that FromSoftware has ever made. This boss fight definitely shaped the future of the Souls games. You got a classic look of the big boy and the fast one. It's a really great duo here. Definitely a bit of an overwhelming fight, especially at first. And if you have done this, if you're doing this for the first time. But one of the coolest parts of this boss fight, as some of you already know, if you kill one, the other will absorb its corpse and the boss fight becomes a lot harder. So overall, just a really great experience and is put very high on the tier list. Last but certainly not least, we have the Taurus Demon. This guy is a pretty good second boss in Dark Souls. I would definitely put him solid. He's just in the middle. Nothing too crazy about him, but for my first time playing Dark Souls, he wasn't much of a challenge, but he definitely got me really excited to play through the rest of the game. It's also amusing how in the beginning of the game, he is a boss fight, but later throughout the game, he is just a regular guy you encounter. And that is going to do it for this tier list. Please let me know down below your opinion and which ones were your favorites and least favorites. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.